My name's Evan Gray with Shepard Residential College. Our question was about helicopter parents and whether such behavior is the right thing to do and if it is ultimately helpful to the student, and how our table felt about the actions of helicopter parents. The first thing we kind of talked about was just that we kind of felt that maybe it is a current that kind of exists right now with parents in today's society, but what we really were curious about is really how prevalent it is, because we hear a lot of the anecdotal evidence, but we really weren't sure of really quantitatively how prevalent it is. But what we did really comment on was how really the new modes of communication have really made it easier for parents in this society that really encourages parents to really take an active role in their children's lives. It just makes it so much easier. I mean, we talked about at our table how, you know, we religiously call home once a week. And so, I mean, there's a fine line between a parent who, you know, wants to still be a part of their kids' lives and then just cross the boundary and then sort of micromanage, and we feel like that's where it becomes very detrimental, and it really removes the ability for people to learn how to be self-sufficient, responsibility, be able to develop problem solving at a time when really they're supposed to start learning how to become an adult. So those are some of our thoughts.
Our question was also about helicopter parents, and we had two different reactions to it. One was from the professor here, Will Reno, who had some minor incidents with helicopter parents, and he took comfort in the FARPA law, which actually prevents them from talking to parents. And I actually work in the Technology Support Center, where we also are prevented from legally talking to parents, which is kind of a comfort, frankly. And we just also wanted to thank Vice President Sunshine for giving the speech tonight.
Hi, I'm Francesca. I'm from Women's Residential College, and ours was about the level of student involvement in like the university, and more of like what our input would be for like the administration side or academic side of the university. And basically we talked about, well, we came to like a basic conclusion that, you know, why not have like student involvement, no matter what level, whatever standards, we should basically have minimum, I mean like at least some input from students, because basically we are involved, we are part of the university.
Hi, I'm Stuart Sarbacker from International Studies Res College. One of the things we talked about was with respect to protest and war, and obviously you talked quite a bit about the response to the Vietnam War. We're wondering how you would put in perspective the current situation in Iraq. Anecdotally speaking, I can say as a faculty member, my impression is that the war is unpopular among the students, but yet it has not really caused the sort of protest culture. And I think several possibilities for this were offered. One was the fact that we have a volunteer army, that both genders are participating in the army. Of course, we also talked about how men still have to register for selective service and women don't. So we were wondering your perspective on that. And then also, if it's true that the library is built like a fortress because of the legacy of this era, and whether or not you are personally responsible for the interior design, especially the color of the carpeting.
On the question of the draft, and whether the fact that there isn't a draft now, whether that's contributed, I personally think it contributes immeasurably to what's on the mind of young people today. I talked a little bit about this in my remarks, but people who, among those who were most emotional about their anti-war sentiments in the Vietnam period were those that were very much in concern about themselves and their brothers and sisters and uncles and girlfriends and boyfriends and so forth. But, in terms of getting drafted, it wasn't women back then, so it wouldn't have been girlfriends, but it would have been boyfriends. So I personally believe that it's a huge factor in why you saw much more activism among your age, the age of students, than now. With respect to the library, it's not just the library, it's Rebecca Crown and Hogan were all designed by the same person. Rebecca Crown opened, I think, in '67. The library opened like my sophomore year, so '68. So I don't think they were designed to be fortresses, notwithstanding what you might think about and what I might think about how they look. They preceded a little bit the bulk of the student activism period, although there was a free speech movement in Berkeley in the early 60s, and maybe that was part of it.
Hi, I'm Angelica Gonzalez. I'm from the Communications Residential College, and we had the question about the helicopter parents, and I actually had not heard the term until tonight, and I don't think it happens I mean, obviously it does happen, but I think it's a socioeconomic and cultural thing, because I feel like children who were more affluent, maybe growing up, their parents felt that they maybe, like, since they were paying so much from their own pockets, maybe for the kid to go to the university, you know, they should step up and, like, be active as far as, you know, getting a good grade right, or, you know, what have you. And I think that plays into it, so yeah.
I'm Grace. I'm from the Cultural and Community Studies Residential College. We also brought up that point. We think that parents tend to think of degrees as a form of investment nowadays, and so that's why they would get more involved in it. But we also brought up how the changing views on, I called it the walk it off mentality, have changed. So you can even see it in organized sports today. The parents will be yelling at the refs over some bad call instead of just letting the kid get up and run off again. So I think it just delays growth a little bit in having the kid learn from their own mistakes.
I'm Stan Pallett from the Public Affairs Residential College, and we kind of mirrored those same negative sentiments towards helicopter parents. I even saw it before I left for college. My sister is a junior in high school, and there was a call a day before about a change in the grading scale. And within 3 days, there was so much anger by the parents that they actually changed the policy back. And I think that kind of mirrors the fact that it really lessens the educational experience, because then it becomes the parents taking the forefront in education rather than the students and administration working together as a cohesive unit. And I think especially in a college setting, it's important for us not only to learn information, but also learn how to work in the real world. And by doing that, we can learn to deal with situations from our own standpoint, and if we have a problem, to learn how to express ourselves in order to solve that.
My name is Danielle Johnson, and I'm from the Residential College Board table. We had the question about the level of university decision-making and the level of student involvement in that process. And we discussed the necessity for an open dialogue between the administration and student bodies. We talked about the necessity for students to work to understand the decisions that the university is making, and as opposed to simply reacting to a decision once it has already been made. And we talked about improving open dialogue and communication, and also improving the divide between students and ASG and the administration, and improving those communication lines.
Hi, I'm Will. I'm from Jones. And our question was about activism in the late 60s, and then what's the role students should take in interacting with the administration. And it boiled down into, like, we had a bunch of little conversations, and one was the difference between the 60s and today, and how there was the draft then, and there's not a draft right now. And like he said, Northwestern's not really sending kids to war. But we have friends at home, but even still, we're mostly getting secondhand accounts. And that our lives, sort of, even in this day, and the way they're, like, everything is sent to us, we're so overstimulated by, like, the internet and television, if you have a television, or, like, all the news we get is filtered through some way, and it's just coming at us all the time. So, and our lives here are so busy that a lot of people think, oh, I would be active if I weren't so busy. And it's just really not seen as a priority, I guess, for most of the students, even myself included. I'm a music major, and there was the March on Washington, and I was like, oh, I wish I could go, but I'm in a show that day, and it comes down to priorities in that sense. And the other thing we were talking about was really faculty and administration relationship with students, and how we take control of our education, and really how much control do we have, or should we have, because the American education institution, like, and the global one, is growing and changing all the time. But in which direction are we going to go? Are we going to go towards a more global world view of things? Are we going to go towards a more practical, down-home view of things? Like, I mean, who here can milk a cow? Or like, it's like this fortune cookie that my friends keep getting in the Hinman Dining Hall. Don't be afraid of computers, be afraid of the lack of computers. Like, who here could function really on a basic level without all those things? And so our society and everything is based such an extent towards like advancing. We felt like we were losing some of the things. But do we go back and like, does that mean we teach farming at Northwestern? But I mean, I'm serious. Like, do we do that? Or do we go, or do we say, you know, I'm gonna be a citizen of the world. Like, I am a citizen of the world, but I wanna be a really active one. And I think we should all learn more about this. Like, how do you go about changing the way you're learning? Like, even if it's as far as, like, in my circumstances, a way to conduct music, like, or a way music should be presented. Like, do you go, like, for the tight harmony, or do you, like, expand into different things, and even controlling vibrato? Like, we're taught so strictly here, in, like, a lot of disciplines, the way things are supposed to be. Like, should we speak out against that? Do we know better? We don't. The thing that came down to is we don't know. But are the lines of communication there, and how do we do that? And that's what we discussed. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vishal Parikh, AirCCI, and we also had the question about student involvement in academic affairs and economic issues here at Northwestern. It's appropriate that the students do get a chance to actually have open discussion with the administration. Currently, I know ASG does take care of academic issues with CTEX and such, and then you have student funding that also takes place through them. Now, a question our table did have is, to what level does the administration actually interact with ASG to figure out what's going on so that we can determine that appropriate level? Also, boundaries for student behavior. I'm actually unsure of what the boundaries are currently based on the administration, which is what I was wondering if you could touch on that. But I think it's appropriate to have certain, not demonstrations, but certain activities. For example, the other day in Norris, there was a presentation on unity and between all the different cultural associations, which I think is fairly appropriate, but to what extent are they allowed to go is what I'd like to actually know from the administration.
I think demonstrations along the lines of what you were just talking about and those like it are wonderful for students and faculty or staff to get together and parade around, if you will, or share information by holding placards and those kinds of things as a way of sharing your concern and educating others about what's on your mind are just fine. I think where you run into difficulty only is when you start to interfere with the rights of others, whether they're other students or administrators and those kinds of things. But there are many, many signs of activism that you can do as a student or as faculty or staff that don't get anywhere near interfering with others and are perfectly fine. I mean, this environment is all about exchange of ideas and people learning from other people's points of view. And so if you had an instinct or desire to clamp down on it and limit it, I mean, you're going in exactly the opposite direction. And that's not our intention at all.